Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Greetings, all you pre-New Year's revelers. The party is just keeping rolling on now that you've landed on Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. And what better way to welcome the next chapter of your future than to spend 45 minutes or so getting all the good oil on the latest and greatest gadgets and tech to start the next quarter of the 21st century. So pop some corks and blurt some of those party whistles for our 2025 party master, Mr. Matthew Dickerson.
Now, if I'm not incorrect, that's probably a double negative. I hate double negatives. If I'm correct, then this should be New Year's Day when people are listening to this.
Well, it'll be close too, I reckon.
No, that's right, New Year's Day.
I think about two days
no,
from.
sorry,
if it's Monday.
Overmorrow will be New Year's Day.
New Year's Day will be overmorrow.
That's right, good. Okay.
So if you're listening to this on the Monday,
that's right. When hopefully
New Year's is overmorrow.
That's right. When people are jumping on it straight away. So it just gets a bit confusing because we're recording this before Christmas because I don't want to make us work too hard over Christmas, so we're recording it early. We've, of course, got our free book promotion going still, so that started 2 days before Christmas as our Christmas present. So go to your favourite podcast app, listen to the podcast, leave a review, send an email to free book
coming your way.
techtalk.digital, and then you'll get a free book sent
for all
out
those
to you.
people that get hammocks for Christmas, you've got something to do while you lounge in your hammock.
That's right.
Reading a book. All
Do a
about
review
tech.
first, then get a free book. But I've got a present for you. So, yes, people are listening to this just after Christmas, but we're still in the Christmas time frame. So
That's
I've got a present here for you. And
well, I'm excited.
It's one of the 20. Now, I was going to ask you to guess, but I don't want to do that because you might guess something and go, oh, no, it's not that. Sorry, James.
Then I can guess again.
That's right. And you might have 19 guesses and I go, oh, I've done really poorly
I'm
here.
excited regardless, but if it's a neck fan, I tell you what, I'm just going to be over the moon.
Well, okay, one disappointment.
Okay.
It's not that hot. I better just check the air conditioning's on here in the room.
So from a pet?
Well, I'm twice disappointed now. So maybe this wasn't a good idea. So I'm going to give you the present. So it's got paper. It's been very carefully wrapped.
So I'm allowed to unwrap this right now
because
in front of everyone.
That's right.
Right. Well, I can't pretend I'm not excited because I absolutely am. Here we go. It's paper. There's so much paper. And look. Oh, yes, of course. Well, I should have guessed. Folks, I've just received the Power Up 4.0. It's the smartphone controlled paper airplane kit.
Now, I cheated because last time we spoke a week ago, I said, out of the gifts, James, just for no reason in particular, what's your favourite one?
And of course I would have talked about the paper airplane.
Exactly
because
right.
I love paper airplanes and look, it's a science teacher's go-to.
And without hesitation, you went straight to the paper airplane. I went, oh, that's good. Yeah. And I've actually bought a few of them because I thought on Christmas Day we had the kids home doing this in the backyard. I've only given you one, I'm sorry. But
This is fantastic. I was just going to say, I mentioned the neck fan, but that was only because I would have never expected in a million years that you would have got me the paper.
Because you wanted the neck fan.
I just wanted to look cool on the outfield when I play cricket, all right? No, paper airplane, the Power Up 4.0, there it is.
So
My paper airplane is going to go for days.
That's right.
Not measured in distance, but in time.
That's right. So we'll have a talk about them because I've got a couple that I've got for us and the kids to play with on Christmas Day.
So there's a challenge.
So we can have a chat afterwards and see how we've gone with them.
Well, I can film how far mine goes.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Or for how long it goes.
That's right.
That's lovely. Thank
Isn't
you very
Christmas
much.
fun? Like it's just so much fun giving.
Yes, that's right. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. All right. Well, we better get rolling then.
Sure.
Let's just, with the new year approaching so fast now, we can't muck around. Let's dive in with our first story. Now, are you still a Googler? When you need answers, do you still Google it? You must be a boomer if you do. In 2025, it looks like the act of Googling may just be set to take its place on the bookshelf right next to Grandpa's set of World Book encyclopedias. And just as a side note, if you're still scouring encyclopedias for your info, I am not sure how you stumbled on this podcast. But the writing may be well and truly on the wall for our beloved Google. Users are leaning into other options and advertisers are pulling out. Matt, I feel like I want to do a Google search for the old Seekers classic, The Carnival is Over.
Yeah, well, maybe not do a Google search on that. Maybe use another method because it seems
I just want to keep it alive just a little bit longer.
Yeah, okay, good on you.
I'm keeping the Seekers alive.
I'm sure. Oh, I thought you were keeping Google alive. I'm sure Google would appreciate your efforts there. And it does seem like I kind of have a lot of sympathy for Google losing some of their market share. They've been pretty dominant, but it seems like now we don't want to go to Google and look at a number of options, a number of different sites, a number of different answers we might have to our query. We just want the answer. It's like going to your dad and saying, Dad, can you tell me the answer to that? And your dad would tell you the answer, and that was it. End of story.
There you go.
Your dad didn't say, here's a set of encyclopedias or here's 28 different answers it could be. He would just tell you the answer.
That's
so
right.
what people are turning to now are the things like ChatGPT, Perplexity is another one, answer engines. So not search engines. That's just so basic. We want answer engines.
So
we want the answer.
2002.
It is, isn't it?
I was going to say, if you do Google something and it's not in the first 3 or 4, then you sort of turn around and you try something else. That you don't even remember Googling. You're looking at me like you don't even remember Googling.
What are you talking about? But I was thinking that how often do people click the next? You know, when you've got down the bottom the 28 bazillion pages that you can find those particular search phrases on. You're right. If it's not up in that first list, you don't click next because, it's
some
not
people
there.
won't scroll past even 4 or 5.
And the problem is most of those top ones are paid for rather than actually search engines. So the thing where we're just going to get the violins out in a minute. Google's share of the US search advertising market is projected to fall below 50% in 2025.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. So they've still got a pretty reasonable position, but obviously that's significant. Now, the click-through rates have already dropped by 8% compared to last year. So compare this year, 2024, we're still in at the moment, compared to 2023, Google's click-through rates have dropped by 8%. And here's the thing that I'm really going to get the violins out for. This could cost publishers, so people that are using Google, if you like, $2 billion in lost revenue from website traffic. So when people go to Google and they search and they click on that and they go to a website and then obviously buy things like Power Up 4 planes, then the estimated cost of those website publishers is $2 billion. And it's really complicated. If I go back in my ancient history, I started in business back in the 80s. When I was deciding where to advertise in my local market, there was one TV station. There was a non-commercial ABC, but there was one commercial TV station, one commercial radio station, one commercial newspaper, or one newspaper full stop.
So the decision was really made for you.
The decision of how you advertised was which medium do I want? Do I want TV, radio, or newspaper? It wasn't which of those. Now, deciding where your advertising dollar goes is incredibly complicated for businesses because we have so many different options there. And now some advertisers who want to get traffic to their websites might say, well, do I want to actually use Google? What's another way to get people to my website to generate sales through my website? And in the past, it's been pretty easy. Go Google. That's it. Pretty simple. Now it's going to get more complicated than that, which is probably good from an advertising perspective, from a sharing the market perspective. But for poor old Google, I mean, gee,
What are they going to do?
I know it's going to be
How
terrible.
do they
isn't
stay
it?
alive? Maybe they have free raffle tickets or like lottery tickets that they give away on every 1,000th click.
Well, possibly. Maybe they need to do something. But the other part that's eroding the trust for Google a little bit is that when you do search something on Google, there is a bunch of AI-generated content out there. So you search for something and it gives you an answer and you go, well, hold on, that site doesn't seem to have good information. Oh, wait, that's just been generated by AI. So that's a potential problem as well. Google's got some issues because the US Department of Justice is coming after them. They're saying they need to do things to curb Google's dominance. Maybe they won't need to do anything because maybe Google's dominance will be curbed by some other competitors. But it is one of these real paradigm changes, I think, that people have tried to compete against Google in the search engine market. And it's almost a bit pointless because they've got such a strong market share. Anywhere, different countries, anywhere from 93 to 97%. And I do question those numbers because I go, what else do you use? So if you're not using Google, what are those 3% using if they're not using Google? But now the answer is not, let's go and find something that's better than Google or that's somehow competing against Google. Let's shift the whole market to answers rather than searches. So it's quite fascinating. Where are we going to end up in a year's time? I'll be fascinated when we talk about this in a year's time.
Well, that's why these shows are so great to go back and have a look at retrospectively, aren't they?
Yeah.
But I was going to say, the Roman Empire, everyone, if you were living around, say, 200 BC, you would have just assumed that the Roman Empire was going to go on forever and ever and ever. Everything.
We've seen examples of this for many companies in the past, and you can't stop innovating. And Kathy Freeman, people might have forgotten about Kathy Freeman, but Kathy Freeman won the 400 metres at the Sydney Olympics in 2000. Australian star, wonderful person, wonderful ambassador for our country. And I remember seeing a Nike poster that Kathy Freeman was sponsored by Nike, and it had a picture when the hype was at its utmost. Sydney 2000 Olympics, everyone was thinking about Olympics and athletics, and Kathy Freeman was a star. There was this great poster with a wonderful image of Kathy Freeman running, and it said, the way to stay number one is to train like you're number two. Now, that's easy to say, but to do that, to have that mindset, if you're Google, when you're so far in front, you've got to keep innovating. People go, well, do we need to? Let's just sit back and, if we go from 93% market share to 92%, big deal. But now someone's come along with a big deal. So it's a fascinating space at the moment. And I must admit, I am doing exactly what this story is about. I'm going to get answers rather than Google. Very rare do I go to Google now because I get the answer, and it's only if I go, I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if that seems right. I want to get a bit more information, then I might go to Google.
I think that it's always been coming, the need for people to become more discerning in what they receive as truth information.
Yeah. That's true too.
So we've got to learn how to become discerning, and if we're just asking for answers and then just going with it, whatever's spat at us, then we've got an issue with that too.
So to give you an idea of how I use it, I had a lightning strike recently, and I've got lots of things protected, lots of electronics around the house, lots protected, but it managed to zap a couple of things. And one of my devices was about 10 years old. And I'm thinking, well, I've got to put the insurance claim in. How do I find the equivalent of that? What am I thinking? I've just go and ask ChatGPT. So I actually said, and I gave the specific model number for this device I've got this model. Can you give me the current equivalent of that in the same brand, and then give me a spec comparison? So when I lodge that with the insurance company, I can show legitimately that I've got the modern equivalent. And I waited about 10 seconds, and there was the complete specs of my current model, the specs of the new model, and some had changed. Obviously, in 10 years' time, things had changed. But I went, well, I feel quite confident with that I lodged that with the insurance company, and they'll say, no, that seems like the modern equivalent. So that just saved me an hour of mucking around with specifications and finding the right ones, or ringing a salesperson and saying, give me the information. So it's that sort of thing that you can just get. You just can't get out of Google.
We see it in cop shows all the time. The forensics guy estimating the time of death. It's a gruesome business in forensics, and in the past, we needed to lean on gory clues like the life cycles of fly larvae living in open wounds or the degree of necrosis of the flesh, etc. Well, it's a gory business indeed. A good TV coroner can call time of death without question, but it may surprise you to know that it's not necessarily that easy. At least it wasn't that easy until AI jumped in to lend a hand.
I do always find that if only things worked in the real world like they do on a TV show.
Get crime solved in an hour.
That's right, every time. And let's take out the ads. It's really only 45 minutes. But CSI, absolutely, they'll say, time of death, 7:18 a.m. And you go, wow, that was impressive there.
Well done.
How did you work that out? And they'll say a few things that sound impressive. But, of course, I've worked out that those shows aren't real. They're fiction. So it's not always like that.
Have the guy that read the script.
That's right. So well done to him. They've now started creating a database called GEOFOR, GEOFOR. And at this stage, they've only got 3,200 cases logged, which is not a lot in the whole scheme of things. And information's fed into this, where they've got all this case data, over 200 people have contributed case data, where they've had accurate information about the time of death, so not just turning up and there's a dead body there and wonder when it happened. So they've got CCTV, or they've got someone that was present that they can say, yes, it was 7:18 a.m., for example. And then they look at things like you mentioned, maggots, flies, beetles, sounds like fun, doesn't it? Bloated abdomens, clouded corneas, fingertips, skin discoloration, so a whole bunch of information about that, and including the environmental factor. So if it's very cold, if someone dies and it's in a cold climate where it might be ice around, their body's going to look different after 5 hours compared to sitting there in the Sahara Desert, for example. So all of that information has been fed in. The idea here is that what AI does really well, as we've talked about it before, is it can analyse so much information, a bulk of information. You get the guy on CSI and he looks at all those things and says, oh, yes, based on this, this is the time of death. But he's using his experience, his or her experience. That's limited. They might be incredibly experienced. They might have been in the game for 40 years. but they've only got 40 years of an individual's experience. They might have read some papers as well, but it's still only one person. And then how well can you sort through that database of all that information in your mind?
Not as well as AI can.
That's right. AI can do all that. So it's essentially looking at, it's not creating something new. It's not inventing a new wheel. It's saying, well, let's just look at all the previous data. And based on all that, well, I can estimate pretty accurately exactly when this particular death happened. Now, you learn all sorts of interesting things when you do research. You have an R-squared value. And the R-squared indicates how accurate the prediction is in terms of the time of death. So R-squared gives you a value from 0 to 1. I think they should multiply by 100 because that would sound better. 0 to 100 would
So
sound
people
better.
who are familiar with stats know all about R-squared.
Right. So if I wasn't familiar with it, so there you go.
There you go.
I thought it might have been specific to time of death.
No.
Right.
It's just general statistics.
Okay, thank you. There you go. I've learned even more
It's
now.
about correlation.
Yep, there you go. So the R-squared value at this stage for GO4 is about 0.8.
Oh,
So
right.
Not too
Pretty
bad.
close to
Yeah,
one.
that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
So it's not too bad. Now, again, that's today with only 3,200 cases logged. As you can imagine, you get up to 32,000 cases, 320,000 cases, et cetera, you'll get that R-squared value much closer to 1. So, again, what would the R-squared value be for humans? Well, I don't know, but probably a lot less than 0.8 when they estimate that time of death. But the problem is, you don't really know what the real value is because you've got an expert who looked at it and said, I estimate that. So as far as he's concerned, it's 100% accurate. So,
Yeah.
but I'm sure they give a range too. They would often say between 3 and 5 a.m. or whatever
Yeah.
it might be. I'm always going for these AMs because I'm assuming that
Well, if they can say it was 7:18, then they know exactly who was walking past at that time.
that's right. If they
Yeah.
can get it that accurate. And that's where I think you're getting to, that you're getting closer and closer to the exact time of death based on all these factors. So then when you go and say, so where were you at 7:18 a.m., then you can actually get that information a bit more drilled down. So
And just make sure you got your alibis straight, guys.
that's right. Don't fiddle with a few minutes there because it mightn't be good enough. And I do actually wonder now, because I used to see CSI would look at things like time of death, but now they just go to CCTV because there's CCTV everywhere. So they've just got the murder's been
It's
filmed.
just so much easier.
That's right.
Athletes at the top of their game are all up on the VO2 max fitness metric. Testing your VO2 max generally involves sustained high-level physical exertion in a lab where you're hooked up to a big clunky breathing tube and stuff, and that's why it's traditionally only been the athletes at the top of their game who've been concerned with it. It's pretty involved. But Matt, the game is about to be thrown open to a broader audience thanks to the miracle of wearable tech.
Wearable tech is just getting so
We love
impressive.
it.
Oh,
We love it here at Tech
it's
Talk.
great. There are so many things we can get from our body. When you go into the health app on your phone and start looking through all the different things, heart rate variability, I mean, simple things like heart rate now, that's so yesterday, getting all this extra information, and VO2. And when I started looking,
So I'm thinking I've got a watch on, but it's connected to a big vacuum cleaner tube that I have got stuck in my mouth while I'm
like
running.
you see when they're on the treadmill running
Yeah,
to get their proper VO2. And so essentially, it's one of these things where you look at enough indicators, you can find out other information where you don't have to be hooked up to the big vacuum tube and run on the treadmill. And that's what a watch is doing. That's what it's essentially doing. It's looking at a whole range of variables and then saying, based on other data, based on people that have been hooked up to a vacuum cleaner and vacuum tube, then I know that that person that's got a VO2 rating of 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever, has got these other indicators. So not as accurate, but when you go and do those tests, if you want to do those tests and you're not a member of the Australian Institute of Sport, you're going to pay several $100s. And you'd question why you would do that
if
you're
you're just
not
doing it to parkrun, for parkrun purposes, just go and enjoy the parkrun.
That's right. You're probably
Don't
not
worry
going to do
about
it
your
if you're
VO2
fucker.
max.
That's right. But I actually
Or
went
get a
and-
watch that does it.
That's right. And I went and looked at mine, and I actually didn't know what it meant until I actually started analysing it a bit. So I went and looked at my VO2 max, and it was 51.3. And I went, well, is that over 100? I'm pretty disappointed. I'm only halfway there. But then it had all sorts of information. It said 47 to 56 is excellent. I went, oh, good. I'm in the excellent range. Above 56 is when you start to get to the elites. When you get to the real elites, when you get to the marathoners or the Tour de France cyclists, it's getting up around 70 or 80. So I've just confirmed that I'm not going to run in the Olympics in the marathon.
Not the next Olympics, but
Give me enough time, you
give you
reckon?
enough time. Yeah.
Right, yeah, I'll keep working on that.
You've got homework.
But it is quite fascinating what sort of information we can glean. And then what I like about that is you can start to look at that and go, well, I'm not going to be Olympian, but can I make it 51.4? Can I keep doing things to improve. And I've actually noticed when I looked at a little graph of my VO2, I'd noticed times when I've been overseas for a couple of weeks when I haven't been able to exercise as regularly as I normally would, then it actually has dropped. So it's down around 48, 49. So then I come back and get back into it and starts to go up again. So it can vary that much. And I think that's a bit of age too, James. I find that as I get older, it's harder.
So your birth certificate's penalising
I
you now.
know, it is. It's actually, it seems like a one-way street because it seems like if I don't exercise for a few days, I lose fitness quickly, and then if I exercise those few days back, I don't gain it back as quickly. So it seems like
work harder.
I know,
for longer.
it just seems unfair. Can't it be completely reversible, or the other way around? Exercise a little bit, my fitness goes up. Exercise not, well, it goes down slowly, but it seems to be the opposite.
Anthony Hopkins says about that. You know, Anthony Hopkins, he was Hannibal, and he says, "Just enjoy life and eat the cake."
Yeah, fair enough too.
and I've taken that on board.
Yeah, good work. But it is fascinating. Have a look at that. If you've got a wearable, if you've got a smartwatch, have a look at that and just see the sort of information you can get. And can it start to predict some things that might be important? Well, if you've got a VO2, there is definitely a link between high VO2 or good VO2, it doesn't have to be elite athletes, and how long we live. So if you do focus on something like that and try and increase that VO2, we're going to live longer, which means we're going to eat more cake. But then we're not eating the cake if we're getting high VO2. Oh, it's so complicated.
That's all right. You can eat the cake and maybe do a bit of fitness stuff too.
That's good.
Work
Well,
it off.
part of the reason I exercise is because I like chocolate. So that seems like a fair trade-off to me.
In the world of data storage, where information is simply determined by how electrons can be directed through a material or by how material can make light dance, the accuracy in how that data can be retrieved is dependent on the integrity of the material, if that doesn't sound too complex. So if you really want to keep your data safe for a long time, you need to choose a storage material that's really, really tough. Matt, they say diamonds are forever.
Diamonds are forever. And there's so many things that we use diamonds for. They're wasted on the finger of mainly a female, I suppose, the finger or the earrings of someone.
Necklaces.
Absolutely wasted. Industrial diamonds, they can use them on saws and make them really tough, but they can use them for storage of data. And they are hard. If you remember the old Mohs scale, of course you remember, but I remember from school the old Mohs scale of hardness. And
you would have been playing with talc back in those days. And kids, if you're playing with talc these days, please don't anymore.
That's right.
For the asbestos fibres.
But I used to always say to the teacher when we look at the Mohs scale of hardness and you have the different things you could test, I'd go, well, where do we get the diamond to start testing that one? And the teacher would just give me a dirty look because obviously they didn't have diamonds there just handy to go and test them with. But obviously it's hard, one of the hardest natural materials. But it can be used then to store data. Much better use. I'm going to tell my wife this. Much better use than having fingers with rings and diamonds on them. Just use those diamonds to store some data. Mm-hmm. Store photos of the kids would be much better use for it. So what they do is they basically use the diamonds. They do ultra-short laser pulses to create atomic scale hollow spaces to store the data.
That's amazing.
That's incredible, isn't it? Yeah. So you're getting a diamond, you're putting these little tiny holes in it, and obviously using that ones and zeros for I would imagine, holes and not holes to store that information. One diamond optical disc, so that sounds like a fairly big disc to me, can hold 2,000 Blu-ray discs. So the equivalent data of. So it's not bad as a storage medium.
And what's that in terms of CD-ROMs?
A lot.
It's a swimming pool of CD-ROMs.
It's absolutely at least an Eiffel Tower of CD-ROMs stacked end to end. So, so that's a lot of data.
Yeah.
But the other really good part about it is that you've got good long-term storage. So a diamond's resistant to degaussing, so any sort of electromagnetic field, electric leakage, tampering. Provided the diamond sits there and is not crushed, then it's going to be pretty good in terms of its data storage long-term capabilities. And I'm intrigued by this. The total fidelity, they said, in terms of storing and reading data, they rate at 99.48%. Now, I thought it would have been 100 because that means that some of my data is coming back wrong. And 99.48 in the whole scheme of things is not...
It sounds like a lot, but it's actually, you're missing 0.52% there, which is probably a lot.
And if that was data that you were using for, I don't know, nuclear programs or something, that bit of that 0.52% might be quite significant.
We've got to get better diamonds.
That's right. Go and get some better diamonds, folks. And maybe that's because it's just early days in this because it hasn't been used a lot yet. But I actually think there's a movie plot here, surely. Someone walking around with a ring on, or actually one of my favourite cartoon games that we used to play with the kids when they were very young was the old Looney Tunes Back in Unction, and you had the blue monkey diamond. So the blue monkey diamond, I'm sure it was called, and you had this blue diamond at the end. That was the whole point of the whole game, was to get this blue diamond. So maybe that blue diamond had, the internet stored on it or something like that before the internet really was a thing. But it's actually quite interesting where we'll use this. I'm sure there'll be areas that we'll have for long-term storage. We know we've got areas where we've got critical information for mankind stored for future generations. When we finally get rid of all the people and AI takes over, then they go, hold on, we're missing some information.
Check out the Doomsday Vault, folks.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. That it's stored, probably they'll be using it to store some information in the Doomsday Vault. So, yeah, quite fascinating.
Here's your chance to grab a free copy of the latest Tech Talk compilation book in 3 easy steps. Step 1. Listen to any Tech Talk episode, like this one right now. Step 2. Leave a review on your favourite podcast app. Step 3. Email a screenshot of your review to freebook@techtalk.digital with your name and address. The first 20 emails each week until the end of January 2025 will each receive a free book. Don't wait. You are listening to this podcast right now. Leave a review and send that screenshot to freebook@techtalk.digital. Tech Talk, your weekly gateway to the tech world.
Well, everyone knows that the Americans love something to get paranoid over. So why not send high-flying balloons into the upper atmosphere to take photos of everything below with razor-sharp resolution, no less? That should settle the conspiracy theorists right down. Matt, I guess there's good reason behind all this.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a whole lot of kerfuffle to be had.
That's right, for being able to spy on you in your backyard, obviously. Now, at this stage, the previously commercial satellites could get resolutions down to 30 centimetres. Now, by that, essentially, a pixel was 30 centimetres. So, 1 pixel, 30 centimetres.
When we're talking about resolution, we're talking about, could you tell the difference between two lines that are 30 centimetres apart?
Yeah. And you think about someone's face being more than 30 centimetres, say, large, then trying to make out a face at that resolution from a satellite image, it's going to be pretty difficult. And apparently, I always thought this was a real thing, but apparently in the movies when they say enhanced image and then I get a razor sharp image of that person from a satellite, that's not real.
That's called movie magic.
That's right.
So, I remember watching that, what was that movie with Will Smith, Enemy of the State, that's the one. Right. And they just kept on zooming in and clarifying on stuff. And it was just like, this is amazing.
Amazing technology,
what they can do.
Only it was
government.
real. That's right. So Near Space Labs is a company that's got autonomous balloons. So again, one of the challenges when you've got satellites is they're a long way away. Trying to get resolutions better, and I'm actually pretty impressed they can get to 30 centimetres, but trying to get images that are finer than that are a better resolution is pretty hard when you're a long way away. So part of the solution is to come closer. A balloon, like putting a plane up there, is expensive to keep burning fuel to just take photographs of you in your backyard sunbaking in the nude on Christmas Day. So having
things that entertain people.
That's right.
Stop watching me in the nude, please.
Having autonomous balloons is a better way to do it, and Near Space Labs say that they are now in the process of photographing the entire continental US at 7 centimetre resolution. So that means a pixel is now down to 7 centimetres, not 30 centimetres. And at 7 centimetres, I'm able to make out your face much better than at 30 centimetres. So it's pretty impressive. Now, why would you want this? Why do you care? Ignore the conspiracies for a moment. That's obviously a good reason. But if you had, for example, a natural disaster and you wanted to be able to see what you needed to do, what things were damaged, do we need to get people in there? What areas are the worst damaged?
For sure. Get
some imagery of that and see what it looks like so we can start to get some rescue missions mounted. Or are there people at 7 centimetres? I might be able to find people in areas where you might have had a tsunami come through and suddenly there are people washed away somewhere that you mightn't pick up at a 30 centimetre resolution. So that's obviously one part of it. But even as the planet changes, as we get all these changes that are happening on coastlines, in forests, a whole range of areas, I think getting better resolution for all of that. At 30 centimetres, you might say, look, I could make out a coastline change, but you get better and better resolution. You're going to be able to make out these changes much more accurately. So again, it's only across the the continental US at this stage, but being able to get further across the planet, absolutely, you can do it with the same methodology. It might just need near space labs or someone else to go and do the same thing.
There's so much to be learned from what they can photograph here.
Yeah,
it's
that's
gonna
right.
be very interesting what they come up with.
Even the US Department of Ag like to do it to basically look at bushfire monitoring. So they can look at how the growth is and, again, get that more accurate. You can see areas that might be prone to a bushfire in a hot season if you've got better imagery of all that undergrowth. So there's so many different ways you can use it.
Oh, crop farmers as well. Look, those early stages of your crop, you could monitor that to the 7 centimetre resolution. Yeah.
That's right. So how long does it take to do all this? Well, they launch one balloon. It can operate autonomously for about 7 hours. And then in that 7 hours, you could cover about 1,000 square kilometres. So it's slow going. I mean, I think of Australia, 7.6 million square kilometres. So it's slow going, but
that's one balloon
I was
as well.
about to say, you don't just go, let's have one balloon. Oh, gee, this is slow going. Hold on, let's have 2 balloons or maybe 100 balloons. So you can cover the whole
blowing,
area.
Jeff.
Yeah, that's right. So if you had 100 balloons, I think that'd be a reasonable time frame to be able to cover the entire US of A, because it's something that you could do and then again expand that out further. But it's getting better and better. So for those people that want to wear their tin hats, then probably stay inside.
Tesla's come under fire over the past couple of years for rushing out their autonomous vehicles, and supposedly autonomous humanoid, easy for me to say, those humanoid robots. It's forced them to take a step back and reevaluate. And the result may be just a little bit more like a remote-controlled version rather than full autonomy, Matt.
They're advertising at the moment for C++ software engineers as part of their Teleoperated division with its Tesla bot and robotaxi team. So that sounds like more programmers, but exactly as you alluded to, what they want to do is have their robo-taxi service running by 2026. Now, we've talked about it before. Sometimes Elon Musk likes to make wild promises and then see those deadlines rushing past him. But 2026 would be reasonable because we already have robo-taxis operating, autonomous robo-taxis operating in certain parts of the world, including the US. Yeah, that's right. So they're happening now. Tesla, despite their multiple promises and multiple deadlines they've missed so far, they're still keen on doing this, but part of the solution may well be they'll have some people sitting back in a central control centre and they'll be watching, maybe controlling, maybe just keeping an eye on ones that seem like they need a bit of help and they're autonomous until they're not autonomous. But it just goes to show this whole concept of autonomous vehicles is pretty hard.
Yeah,
it's not.
For sure.
It's not as easy as everyone said.
But the robotics as well. I remember being excited by this Tesla bot that they're bringing out. It's going to be, a humanoid robot and whatnot. And when they brought it out, it turned out to be like it was moving okay by itself, but it was essentially as someone. The person they were talking to was a person.
Yeah, that's right. And so it's something that I think will get there, but it's just so many factors to come into it. One of the parts about this is when you start putting the vehicles in challenging conditions. So, for example, it's raining or there's snow on the ground. So those challenging environments, that's when it gets even harder because as sensible humans, we say, there's a bit of snow around here. I might slow down. But again, for an autonomous vehicle, it says the speed is posted as this speed. I can drive along. There's no cars in front of me. Away I go. Hold on. I haven't got the grip I thought I had. What's going on here? So there's all these different scenarios that I can see that having a human behind the scenes might not be such a bad thing, at least in the early days. But, I mean, ultimately, it's got to be safer. Ultimately, having people not get tired, not get drunk, not fall asleep, just pay attention, not have
and
kids in the back.
Humans make human mistakes. So,
they do, yeah. So autonomous vehicles will make autonomous vehicles mistakes. But if you're interested and you're a C++ software engineer, go and apply for a job there and then let me know what's going on to see how much it's going to be autonomous and how much...
Come back and report to us. Please.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. Don't tell Elon.
All right, folks, it's time for our semi-regular segment that I like to call scary stuff that we probably could have just left in the movies for once and for all. Ever thought of turning a cockroach into a remote-controlled cyborg? Me neither. But somebody did, and now the world has cyborg cockroaches. Matt, You're here to tell us now that we've got nothing to fear but fear itself. Is that right?
No, you've got something to fear. Cyborg cockroaches. It doesn't get much worse than this. So why wouldn't you just make...
With tiny lasers. Sorry.
Why wouldn't you just make little tiny robotic devices and send them in? That would make sense to me. They've used, in this particular example, the Madagascar hissing cockroach, which presents a whole range of mental images.
Worse.
That's right, it does, doesn't it? Now, they want to use them for search and rescue missions. So there is a disaster, there's been a building collapse, they want to know if people are in there, then would you be happy to see a Madagascar hissing cockroach as a controllable cyborg coming to say, it's okay, Matthew, we're coming to get you. Me and my 100 friends are on the way to come and nibble at your skin while we're waiting. So what they do is they knock out the cockroaches with some carbon dioxide. So they're basically anaesthetised, if you like. Then they attach some electrodes into the soft membrane under the cockroach's exoskeleton. So they then can control their legs and put them in the direction they want to go. They hook up a little camera so they can see what's going on and a little transmitter to transmit the information back.
Sounds like it's so much work, and I'm sure it would have been easy just to make a little metal cockroach.
You'd think so, but in this way, the researchers that were doing it said they didn't have to worry about having something that they could build to move around. The cockroach can do that. The cockroach has already got legs, it's got muscles, it can actually move around. We don't have to worry about that. We just have to have a little bit of control. So a few little zaps here and there, and we can control this little fella, and then we can send back the information rather than build something that can do all this. The other thing is that cockroaches can get into various spaces. Mind you, it might be a bit tougher with a bit of technology on their back and strapped to their backpack as such, but they're able to get into these various places. So in something like a building collapse, for example, you could use it. Now, I did start to wonder, is there such a big call for building collapse search and rescue missions that we don't have enough technology? We use heat typically, or even sound to try and rescue people in these situations. It's not like we're having a building collapse every minute of the day that we need this solution.
So what are you suggesting? That someone has thought, I want to make a cyborg cockroach, but I need to explain it off somehow?
Maybe. I'm thinking that you've got to come up with a practical reason as to why you do it, because what they're talking...
left it in the movies.
That's right. What they're talking about here is if you've got a job that you need this cockroach, this cyborg cockroach, then you don't need one. You need hundreds or thousands, because one, imagine the collapsed building, one can go a certain amount into one area of the building. Hundreds can go all over the place. Thousands can go absolutely all over the place. So the main thing they're doing at the moment, this is if you want to be scared, the main thing they're doing at the moment is working out an automated process to turn cockroaches into cyborg cockroaches. So they'll have a factory, an assembly line of pumping out these cockroaches in mass numbers for the disaster, obviously, not for any other reason. It's a whole range of interesting stuff. Somewhat scary.
Yes, it is.
And what next? I mean, the hissing cockroach scares me a bit, but maybe the funnel web spider. Imagine making a funnel web spider, a cyborg funnel web spider.
They're going to have insect/arachnid wars where they're attaching little explosives and lasers to these things.
That's right, the war is on. So it's fascinating. Have a look at it. Go and search it. I watched one of the videos and it does look very strange.
Wow.
But
this is Pandora's box. It's been opened.
It's been opened, that's right, and let's see where it goes.
Now, the knees are a pretty fancy piece of biological machinery. Just ask someone who replaces them for a living. It has to carry all your weight and often more than that. There are heaps of bits that have to work together just perfectly. That being said, knee surgery is pretty commonplace these days with about, I'll look this up, I Googled it, 210 in every 100,000 people going under the knife that are getting knee surgery there. You probably wouldn't think it, but a single knee transplant generates a heap of CO2, more than I'm sure you'd imagine. And that has caused surgeons to rethink about how they go about their job, Matt.
And this is fascinating for me because that's not my number one concern. If I need a new knee and my surgeon says, Matt, we can whack in on your knee, and it does seem an incredibly simple but complicated process now.
Yeah.
Rip open the knee, whack in a new one, hammer it into place, and away you go. You're walking a couple of days later. Fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to say, well, are you doing it with the greenest option possible? Are you
I thought you were going to
sure?
say, can't you just give me a peg leg like the old pirates? No, but yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're not thinking about the CO2 emissions.
I'm not thinking about that. I'm saying, how good's my knee going to be? How quickly can I recover from this? And if my surgeon said, well, look, we can do the standard one, but we can do a very green version of that. It'll take you longer to recover, won't be quite as good, but you'll save 20 kilos of CO2. I'd say, can I just get the better one,
Can
please?
you give me one with extra CO2?
That's right. If it works better, give me an extra one. Maybe I'm showing how selfish I am, but I'll save some CO2 elsewhere and just don't worry about my knee. But this is where we're thinking now in terms of everything we do. Let's question the CO2. How much CO2 are we using now producing this podcast? I haven't thought about that. All these things we've got to think of, James.
You've got dilemmas.
It's fascinating. 131.7 kilograms of CO2 equivalent is one knee replacement. That's the equivalent, while we're measuring things in other areas, other ways, of driving a normal internal combustion engine vehicle 914 kilometres.
Wow.
And I would probably say to the surgeon, I'm just not going to drive 914 kilometres to keep you happy. I've got an
Keep
EV.
you
so
carbon neutral.
That's right. That's a different argument. But the healthcare sector contributes 5.3% of our annual greenhouse gas emissions. So we don't really break it down to sectors. Normally we break it down to generating power or vehicles on the road or shipping. So it's actually quite interesting breaking it down to industry sectors. So I would have thought the healthcare sector was that big a contributor.
5.3%.
5.3%.
So we're assembling a lynch mob?
Well, let's stop all surgery because surgery is the main culprit here.
Yeah.
80% of the CO2 produced by the healthcare sector is produced by surgery processes. Anesthesia is 11%. Just the operating room lighting and air conditioning, there's 8% there. So there are things there, but what are you going to do? Don't turn the lights on in the operating room. That'll save us 8%. We didn't get quite the right outcome we thought we would.
Well, maybe you could withdraw the anaesthetic when you're doing these knee replacements.
No, that seems reasonable too.
And just give them a hanky in the old-fashioned way to bite down on?
I thought it was a bit of bark to bite down on, and a hanky to smother their screams, I think. So we're looking at things, though, and that's the good part of the story is that we are looking at every process. We're looking at everything we do to seeing where we can save it because it doesn't really matter if we can see something we're saving 40%. Let's go and change that tomorrow. That's great. But if we can save 1% on 40 different processes, well, that obviously helped. And I often talk in a business scenario about the 1%ers. Everything. I mean, you hear it in sports so often. If we can just do the 1%ers right, and it's so true, if we can improve every little part of a process just by 1%, if we can improve the healthcare sector by 1%, if we can improve everything we do by 1%, that adds up to a lot of percents. More than 100 even. Not quite.
It was a big story earlier this month, and it's a story that's likely to continue to generate interest over the next few years, across the globe even. Australia is set to put restrictions on social media platforms for kids under 16. Matt, talk us through the ins and outs of this extraordinary bold measure.
Well, we are the first in the world to actually go down this path. And
Well,
it's
the
going to take,
legislation's been made, hasn't it?
Yeah, but 12 months.
How are we going to do it?
well, there's 12 months for it to come into effect, so it's not as if it's
It's
just
not a light
started
switch.
immediately.
Yeah.
But I think the challenge is, I know there's many of my my kids, their friends, are several years older than my kids, and they're in the same year at school, and I can't work it out. And then I realised that they just lied about their age so they could get onto Facebook because the age of 13,
What?
they might have been 10 or 11, they want to get on Facebook. And I know my kids said, why can't we get on Facebook? Because you've got to be 13. But some other parents weren't as strict or didn't keep an eye on their kids, and they just put their birth year up a couple of years. And they typically keep the same birth date, as in the year and the month, but they just put their birth year back a couple of years, and suddenly they're 13. So I imagine that we'll get a bunch of 10, 11, 12-year-olds that are suddenly 16. The problem is if you say, well, we need some proof of ID, well, when you're an adult, you've got a driver's license or a passport or proof of age card. But when you're 10 or 11, you may not have a passport, you may not have needed a passport, but apart from that, you don't have a driver's license, you don't have an easy form of ID, a birth certificate. How comfortable, and probably I suppose you don't always have your birth certificate handy, but how comfortable are people going to be uploading a birth certificate? So the implementation of this is quite interesting in terms of where that goes. The The move has been supported by approximately 77% of Aussies. That probably means there's 77% of people that are above 16. Because
Yeah.
I reckon the 23% below
12-year-olds.
That's right. Those ones under 12 may not be so supportive of it. I think the logic is fine. We do put rules in place for our people in society where we think you can't just rely on themselves. So alcohol in this country is 18, some countries 21. We say, yeah, it'd be nice to say you be responsible or parents be responsible, but sometimes you need legislation, you need laws to say, you know what, we're going to have an industry standard or a community standard that says this is what we think is a reasonable standard.
Forms a line in the sand.
Yeah, it does. So 16 is the line in the sand. There's been a bit of pushback by some different groups around YouTube in particular. YouTube can be used as a great educational tool for a whole range of different things.
We know that video in science is a great way to learn stuff.
Yeah, there you
So
go.
all the CGI, the slow motion photography, or the time-lapse photography, we're just able to understand a lot more.
Seeing is believing, isn't
Yeah,
it? Except
yeah.
for AI videos, but ignore that for the moment. But
Yeah.
that's right. So imagine saying to your Year 7 class, well, I can't let you see that YouTube video that's fascinating and really important from an educational perspective because you're under 16. So there is a bit of a push there, and maybe YouTube will get away with this. And I do actually question sometimes whether YouTube should be called a social media platform. It doesn't seem to have quite the same interaction that you might have on a Facebook or on an X or on a TikTok, for example. It's possible.
Yeah.
You've got the comments area there.
The comments can be like, if kids are uploading videos
Yep.
and people are commenting on those, then the kids got to have some sort of level of resilience and understanding before they start
Yeah.
reading those comments.
So that might be interesting. Maybe what they need to do is have it so that you can't have comments. For example, maybe there's no comments or the comments are just turned off if you've got a YouTube channel if you're under 16, and then leave it so that you can view other ones. Maybe you can have it so that you can view but you can't upload, for example. So there's still a bit to go on this. The Australian Human Rights Commission has been very critical, saying that it was very rushed and the implementation is very vague. Now, for those across the rest of the world, they may not be aware, and maybe even Australians may not be aware, but there will be a federal election at some stage before May 2025. So maybe the current government was trying to get this through before the federal election, make sure it's at least happening, because they may lose government and then they may lose the opportunity, and maybe the new government that comes in, if there is a new government, doesn't want to go down this path either. So there's a whole range of things there. I think in general, my personal thoughts in general, the concept is good. Let's protect people from themselves, but getting it right in implementation and getting it to the point where kids can't get around it. Kids are clever. If you put a little roadblock in place, they'll work out another road to get around. And if you want to work out a way to test a system, give it to someone young and they'll be creative in a way to get around that system, like changing your date of birth, for example, a pretty simple way to do it.
Yeah.
But that's the real question here. And then it would be an unfair playing field that you're sitting in the schoolyard not knowing things that are going on because you're doing the right thing and your parents are making you do the right thing. Other kids are going, just change your date of birth. It's easy. I'll show you how to do it. So it's a real minefield.
It's a form of social capital right now, social media. And
it is. Yeah, that's right. So I'm not sure where it'll all end up. I'm not sure that we'll have it sorted in 12 months because there's so many things to go through. But at least you've got to start somewhere. If you start somewhere and put some rules in place, and then you can change them if you need to. If you find little holes there, plug those little holes. I think that's better than saying, let's wait till we've got it perfect, and then, all this harm has been done in the meantime. So
yeah, we know there's a lot of damage that's been done, and any child psychologist will be able to tell us about that.
Yeah. Anyway, it's an interesting area and one that we have to keep changing legislation to keep up to date with what's happening in technology.
Yeah, exactly. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a wrap for Tech Talk 2024. We're putting a big full stop on that one right there. Now, thanks for an enormous year of science, tech and gadgetry, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for being a wonderful host, which you absolutely are.
Thank you.
We're going to take a couple of weeks off, but it's only you and I. We're going to have a couple of best of episodes to keep people entertained, because I like to make sure that every single week, every Monday morning in Australia and Sydney time, you've got a new podcast there at 9 a.m. and the new one for the next couple of weeks will be an old one, kind of. But
and
a
I'll
best
just
of.
have just a hint of retrospective, so
Yeah.
we'll have an idea about how that went. you
That's
know?
right. So people will listen to stories from early on in the year, and I normally do it the first 6 months of the year and then the last 6 months of the year. So people will listen to those stories from 12 months ago and go, oh, gee, they got that completely wrong, didn't they? They've got no idea what they're talking about. But in this game, the one thing I've learned is you can make all sorts of predictions, talk about things that are happening, but don't expect to get it right. It's a bit like a weather forecaster.
Yeah, that's
except the fact that it's a best educated guess. I don't want to say the word guess, but best educated guess at the time, but it'll move on. But anyway, have fun playing with your Power Up 4.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Thank you for the compliments. And yeah, thanks for the Power Up 4.0.
Yeah, I'm looking forward
Going to have heaps of fun playing with that. Now, what's your record? Did you measure it out?
No, I haven't. I've got it wrapped ready to go for Christmas Day.
Sorry,
we're technically before Christmas Day at the recording.
By the time
date.
anyone's listening to this, they'll have already unwrapped them, I hope. Or maybe you'll keep them in suspense all the way to New Year's.
Maybe.
And with that, there is very little more to be said. We've got the laundry tub full of ice and bottles with poppable tops. So let's quit this yapping and bring this new year in. Thank you for all your company throughout the 2024. Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson is a machine powered by people's insatiable curiosity. And for your part in that, we're truly grateful. I've been your host, James Eddy, and as always, it's a pleasure to bring you this podcast each week. For 2025, make at least one of your resolutions about being kind to people, be generous and caring, and make this tiny little global community a nicer place to live in. Take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you again in 2025.